Hello and welcome to this latest discussion from the Terrace Scottish Football Podcast. I am Craig Fowler, and on this occasion I am joined by Euan Taylor.
Hello, Craig.
Hello Euan, how are you?
I'm fine, how are you?
That's good. It's Tuesday, which always means I'm juggling a million things because I like to travel through to Edinburgh on Tuesdays to stay at my dad's before we record A View from the Terrace, which is recorded at a very cold studio in Granton. So I like to go through the night before, so I don't have to get up at like 5 a.m. for Telford to give me a lift.
That makes sense.
Yes.
That makes sense.
But we're not here to talk about that. We are here instead to talk about the Celtic and Rangers agreement that the two clubs came to over their ticket allocation. Now, you know us on the Terrace, we don't like to focus too much on just the Glasgow clubs, but I think it's fair to say that this decision and the whole palaver that's gone on between the Old Firm sides has wider implications for Scottish football in general, because ticket allocations has not just been a subject that has been about Celtic and Rangers recently. It has also been relevant to their clubs, with Hibs slashing their allocation. We did do a video on that quite recently. There's also Hearts cut theirs to one section for every visiting team. And even this past weekend, we had Dundee United and Raith Rovers, with Dundee United deciding that Raith Rovers weren't getting as many tickets as they did the last time the clubs met at Tannadice. But let's go back to this decision, this agreement that's been reached between the sides. They've both basically, in a statement released by the league, with clubs then bringing out statements themselves afterwards, it was revealed that they have agreed to a European-style away attendance, which is of 5% for each team. And so that means roughly 3,000 Rangers fans at Celtic Park and 2,500 at Ibrox.
Yeah, well, remains to be seen on that front.
Yes, it's been. I noticed it was reported by the Rangers Review, that are part of the Herald umbrella. They reported it as fact that was going to happen, and I was like, are we sure about that, or are we sure it's just kind of roughly 5%, and it'll be like 2,500 for both clubs?
Yeah, I suspect that might happen, and would I fall off my chair in shock if there's a dispute next season around exactly that, and it turns out there are no away fans again? No, I would not. So that's quite a possibility that happens. But yeah, that's that's certainly what was said. I think it was said approximately in the SPFL statement that was approximately 5%. So yeah, it remains to be seen how that's actually configured, but it's better than zero anyway.
So, Euan, what was your take when the news came out that they'd finally come to some sort of agreement on away fans starting next season, and they're not doing it for the next two games, which is a shame? I'd imagine that's to do with the fact that it just wasn't logistically really enough time to plan for the match that's at Ibrox this coming weekend.
Yeah. You'd have, well, I think Rangers have already sold tickets for seats that Celtic fans would have to have sat in.
Oh yeah, there'd be season tickets on both sides that would be going to fans who'd be expected to go to these games, and therefore that's why it's starting next season.
Yeah. But it's just always, and that was sort of why I'd always thought it would be a bit difficult for it to go back. Certainly go back to the way it was where Celtic had the full Broom loan. That always seemed to me quite difficult for that to ever happen. Whether it's the first step towards that, I don't know, but I suspect not, just because of that season tickets have been sold in that area. My first thought when the news broke, I think it's the way that the news broke was the most interesting thing about it.
Right. Yeah. That came out as from the SPFL rather than either of the clubs.
Yes. And I wonder if this could be the start of something which could be of a bit of a positive for Scottish football, and that would be as hard as for a lot of people to believe that our game would be an awful lot better. Well, maybe not an awful lot better, but better if the SPFL had any kind of executive control over the game whatsoever, which it currently doesn't have.
No.
Now, because the SPFL basically exists as a punching bag. A
lightning rod. A lightning rod's probably the best.
Yeah, a lightning rod is a better. Yeah, a lightning rod's a better way to describe it. A lightning rod, and that's why Neil Doncaster gets paid what he gets paid, because he gets blamed for loads of things that aren't his fault. And that's basically, and not that the things that are, the limited things that are within his purview, has he done a fantastic job? Probably not. But there's a general perception amongst fans across the country that the SPFL holds a lot more power than it actually holds.
Yes.
Because it holds pretty much zero. So, and I wonder if this is the start of the clubs intentionally giving away some of their own power to the SPFL in order to let things happen that they think should happen, but they can't or don't want to have that conversation with their own fans. And it's sort of an example of, basically of a sort of a transfer of power in order to have more power. Reminds me, this is a bit of a tangent, academic tangent. But when I was at uni, I was thinking about this.
You start quoting like the rules of war or whatever it's called.
Sun Tzu. No, the Art of War. It's pretty much it's at least as wanky as that. So when I was at uni, I did the law at uni, and I read this book called Towards Juristocracy by a guy called Rand Herschel, and it was about how certain governments would transfer power away from themselves towards the judiciary, so like judges and courts,
right,
because as a bulwark against democratic forces changing. And actually one of the examples that one of the countries used in this book as an example was Israel. And big story in Israel before the current atrocities happening in Gaza was I don't know if you remember, there were a big protest in Israel about Netanyahu trying to make changes to the judiciary and the powers of the Supreme Court in Israel, and it's still it's sort of a hot topic there. Albeit obviously it's not as prominent in the news at the moment. And the thinking there was that basically there are obviously extremist elements within Israel that get increasingly a large share of the votes. And this has been the case for years, but it's been growing and growing and growing. Now they're actually part of Netanyahu's government. But the controlling the main parties in Israel had sort of decided a while ago that they would certain things could only be changed by a judicial process.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost the same in America with the Supreme Court. That was another example where your things that you think should be political and should be up to the politics of the day to decide, like abortion rights, for example, that's put that's dealt with at the Supreme Court level, so the politicians actually can say, well, I think this, but I can't do anything about it.
Right.
And it sort of stops changes happening that could change democratically. Now you can either say that as a good thing if you think, well, we don't want to be sort of demagogues might get elected and change the law, so there should be sort of protections against that. Or you could say, well, say for example, a communist party might get elected and then not be able to do anything that they want to do because the judiciary stops them from doing it.
Yeah.
So you can see it from both perspectives, and generally people don't give up power unless there's a reason for them to do so.
Right.
And I think the clubs in this case might be thinking, right, we all think we should have away fans at grounds, but our fans are frankly unreasonable. And everybody likes to cut their own, likes it when their away fans are pretty much everybody. Like if the away fans allocation, especially if there's no firm fans.
Yeah, well, I don't think you're going to see many supporters bases protesting if like away fans get cut and it's like, no, more away fans, standing inside the grounds with like signs in their hands.
yeah. So
visitors welcome.
Hey. So everyone's like, I get up here. So everybody thinks that, but the clubs, I think, probably deep down know that's not a really good thing, because one, eventually, as was happening in the firm situation, more and more Rangers fans certainly, and I imagine Celtic fans as well, but certainly more and more Rangers fans, given that it was Rangers that cut the allocation in the first place. I know that more and more Rangers fans have started to get annoyed that they can't get tickets for Parkhead. And yeah, and there's a growing sort of body of opinion where it's like, well, no, we there has to be away fans, at Parkhead. Therefore, we need to let away fans into Ibrox. And that has grown, but there's still probably, if you took a poll, I mean, I think there's a poll in Follow and it was almost like 50-50 in terms of whether they thought this was a good idea. But the voices are much louder on the no, like yesterday, and a Rangers fan should have to give up his seat to a Celtic fan, and that's not the word they would use. Takes the place. So that voice and that side has always been louder, and that's why the change was made in the first place. Because well, in terms of Rangers' perspective, it's because people were fed up that we kept on getting absolutely hammered by Celtic.
Yes, which that was something I've not seen mentioned enough in this. Is that it's just like, yeah. So yeah, actually, keep going, because I've got a point to make on that in terms of the fact there've been no winners in this entire thing.
Yeah, oh yeah. So that was it. So I just to sum up that point, I think that there are always loud voices, and it happens. Obviously, like seats get ripped up, and people are outraged, even though it happens the other way around. And everyone's like, how can
actually cares, because the club's fans do it, end up footing the bill anyway.
Exactly. Yeah. So it all gets sorted, but people are like, oh no, we can't let them in, and so the fans, as a when they're dealing with their own club, everyone's incredibly short-sighted and myopic about these sort of things. And I think the clubs themselves, while they often act like that as well, I think there's probably a bit more of an understanding, in meetings and so on, that the clubs will have between themselves, that we would like this to change, but can we? We don't want to be the ones. You're not going to do it if you're not going to do it. And if you're not going to do it, then we don't want to, like, Rangers wouldn't have wanted to say to let Celtic fans in to Ibrox, and then something happens, or there's an incident, or and then on the next game at Parkhead, no away fans again. That just wasn't going to happen. So that's why the league has had to get involved, and I think there might be a few things like this. There might not just be ticketing, but that would be the obvious first place to start, where it might be that the clubs think, what would be good if we could just say, well, the SPFL have said that this is what we have to do, even though it's the clubs that have said to the SPFL that that's what's going to have to happen. I think they might. It could, and that could be the most positive thing that would come out of it, if the clubs realise that actually some issues to do with the league as a whole would be best placed. And it could be like pitches as well would be another one.
Yeah, I'm doubtful. I'm doubtful of all that. Well argued, but no, I just don't think this is going to make a shift in the Scottish football culture that sizable. And I think, for me, the telling thing wasn't necessarily the league getting involved, but Sky Sports getting involved. And I think, to me, that was the thing that really kind of stood out. And trying to read between the lines, that was the kind of, I was like, okay, this is probably what's happening. Where Sky Sports have said, hang on a minute here, we're giving you guys all this money. Not great money in terms of TV deals, but still, 40 million a season or whatever it is, still a sizable sum of money. They care about Celtic and Rangers the most. They care about Old Firm games the most. That's why we have them 4 times a season, every season. And that's just league games. And they'd be like, hang on a minute, this can't continue any longer. It looks shit. It looks shit when Celtic win 1-0 at Ibrox, and the only Celtic goal is met with complete silence. Mm-hmm. It'll look shit if the same happens at Ibrox with Rangers scoring. It takes away from the spectacle of it. And that's what Sky care about the most, like those two clubs. And I think that's the kind of main thing. They've got involved, and also that means the league's kind of got involved as well. I took the league just releasing a statement as, like, why have they done it and why have Celtic and Rangers not done it at the same time? I just took that as Celtic and Rangers can't be trusted to try and one-up each other in their respective statements.
Oh, there's an element of that. I mean, that is definitely true, because everyone would, I'm sure, the whole thing, I mean, I think the whole thing around 5% isn't worded exactly the same way in both the Old Firm statements. So that's that probably is part of it. But I do think there's an element of them wanting to sort of hide behind the league a bit. I do think, and
you might be right in this instance. I just don't know if that'll shift any sort of balance of power at all.
Yeah, and it would just, I mean, that would, I do think there's just some things that the clubs are getting a bit fed up of, and they don't want to, because basically I think the fans are actually more as a whole. Yeah, I think probably the unpleasant events of 2012 sort of showed how powerful the fans are in Scottish football, and that was about, I think that was about a change at that point, where it was actually clubs listened to the fans at that stage, and how they acted. They acted against their own interests.
Yeah, aye. Every fan base was like, "Don't you fucking dare let Rangers back at the top flight."
Exactly. So they acted. You can argue, some clubs you would say maybe it wasn't their interest for that to happen, but generally speaking, obviously financially it wasn't in the club's interest to do that, but they did it because the fans sort of demanded that was the case, and that, to me, that's been, since then, there's been a sort of expectation that the fans' voices are sort of heard, and obviously since then your clubs have become fan owned that weren't before.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, there is an element
by those who were able to save their clubs.
Yes. Slightly less complicated situations, I would say. But I saw a Celtic fan on Twitter this week saying that you only cost £1 to buy Rangers. Why didn't you buy that? Like, why didn't, instead of Craig White? Like, that wasn't quite as easy as that. Anyway, there was like 20 million quid owed to Bank of Scotland. Anyway, so I think that was about changing the guard in that sense, and then I'm not sure that it's actually been a good. Again, not to say that people who were running the clubs did a good job. I'm not saying that was the wrong decision to dump Rangers down the league. Obviously, it was, but no, I'm not making the argument.
You're contractually obliged as a Rangers fan to say.
Yes, but I'm not saying that.
I loved the rise of the Diddy. All these teams were in cup competitions. It was great.
Yeah. It was magic, wasn't it? But generally speaking, I mean, I don't actually, very few Scottish football fans care about anything beyond their own club. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's just a fact. It's how fandom works. Football fandom.
Even when you go like most Saturdays, I'll often get it's typically my dad, but it's like usually anybody who's just a Hearts fan that I'm at a game with, and it's my job to know the players on the opposite team and how blah blah blah. And it's always the first 5 minutes is always all these questions. Who's that? It's like some of them be like, really? You've not heard of him? It's got 15 goals this season.
Yeah. So people just don't they don't really pay attention, and they don't, they think that the league is against their own club, and they think all the authorities are against their own club, and
mm-hmm.
And
everybody's out to get them, media's out to get them,
everybody thinks that that's the case for every club, which engenders this sort of thing of everyone's a bit sort of siloed, and there's social media and club forums are probably the start of that, and there's a lot more to read just based on your own club for even at the in the lower leagues. You can sort of base all your sort of media intake quite a lot on just around your own club, and not really care about the wider picture. And then every 6 months when Scotland have a bad result, everyone's up in arms about this. Motherwell get beat by some Irish Diddies, and then everyone's worried about the overall game for a week, and then it just goes back to usual. So nobody, your fans themselves don't take a wider view, and a fan voice isn't necessarily, that my argument would be, it's not necessarily a good thing. It sounds like a universal good thing. I'll listen to the fans. I would say not always, because the louder fans are often the more unreasonable. I mean, in the case of Rangers, the main guy who started it, I don't know his actual name, but his name on Follow is Papa Smurf, and he sort of led the campaign to get Celtic fans out of the Broom Loan. And then this season, he started a thread on Follow around when Michael Beales was going from disaster to disaster, basically saying he was feeling like chucking it. He couldn't be bothered, and why was he spending so much money on this? And it's basically, you can't handle losing, can you? You just can't handle losing. So and you were the guy you changed something that was a massive part of Scottish football for years, because you basically could not stand losing games. that's why it happened. So the loud fan voices. I often think that the louder the fan voice is, probably the more unreasonable it often is. And things, if fans could get together and say, for example, something around away ticket pricing would be something that fans think could maybe get together and solve, but that is very difficult because people are like, oh well, no, you charge this, so why shouldn't we charge this? And I don't care how much you get charged. There's an element of that. Even though and that's something that the league could maybe step in. And so, would the clubs be willing to cede that? Again,
but would clubs want that? Would clubs want to reduce their
prices?
Especially at a time where crowds are still pretty strong.
Yeah, so maybe not. But that's to me that's an example of where the whole sort of fan voice thing is pretty. It doesn't really ever act or it very rarely acts in the interest of the fans as a whole in Scottish football, because people just don't they just don't see that, and it would require a lot of organisation to get fans together on that. But even then, who would you lobby? Even if there was an organised fan voice across Scottish football to say, look, we want, and I think there have been campaigns sort of started but I haven't really got anywhere. If maybe we should start it, but but who would you even if you got all the main fan groups of every club in the SPFL or even the Premiership?
Celtic Rangers fans don't listen to us, so we're already a bit stuck.
Exactly. Well, there you go. See, so
shout out to the very few Rangers and Celtic fans who do listen to us. I do pay for the Patreon. I'm always flabbergasted, but you are the good guys. All 17 of you.
Yeah, exactly. There are dozens of us. So they're even if you did that, who would you lobby? The clubs and the individual clubs would be who you'd have to speak to at the moment. If you could speak to the SPFL, and the SPFL would say, "Oh well, we'll mention it at the next meeting," but they don't have any power to do anything about it. So that would be another example of if the SPFL had a bit more of executive control, it would be for the benefit of everybody, because they can maybe say, look, 20 quid is the maximum you can charge an away fan. But do you get clubs willing to sign up to that? Maybe if you could convince the clubs that it's that it'll go down well with the fans across the board, maybe. But again, maybe that's an example of the sort of control that the clubs just would never be willing to cede to an executive body.
Well, if there is maybe a bit more control given to the SPFL when it comes to, at the very least, if it's just given to ticket allocations, do you think that, or do you think this could even potentially lead to a point where clubs vote on it and agree, and the league implements it, that 5% of our away crowd is just across the board, and then anything above that is up to clubs to decide amongst themselves if they want to sell more? Obviously, teams like St Johnstone and Livingston are heading at the league now, but obviously if they were still in it, they would very much prefer to sell more.
9%.
And Hearts and Hibs with the Edinburgh Derby. But do you reckon 5% as a minimum would solve much?
It would be a start. It would be a start. I basically think you shouldn't be allowed to say no away fans. Would be my. That's certainly my view of it. It's a nonsense. So and I think 5% is a decent amount. I would like to see, if, for example, the game where recently where Hearts got absolutely smashed Ibrox, but they went into it knowing, having won 10 out of 11 or something like that, and you thought you were going to win the league. I would. The more Hearts fans at that game, the better, as far as I'm concerned. To laugh at.
We were the clear-headed folk going, no, we're not going to win it. We're not going to challenge Celtic and Rangers. Shove with this. It's just the media constantly can they get desperately trying to whip up something, some sort of competitive interest that doesn't exist. I'm pretty sure most Hearts fans are like, no, shut up. We're not getting anywhere near Celtic and Rangers.
I don't think that's what Joel said. But anyway, so
it's not to be taken seriously when it comes to Hearts winning streak.
No. But no, yeah. So that kind of thing, I think if there were more Hearts, sad Hearts fans at Ibrox that day, that'd be even better instead of just in that wee corner. So I would like to see that be something that is sort of implemented across the board, and I think it would improve even games like that. More so than you're just having the tiny wee corner at Ibrox, and obviously, but I think I don't know what 5% of Tynecastle or Easter Road or whatever it works out at, but
I think 5% of Tynecastle makes it. It's not much difference because only one section right now. I think it might only be two or maybe three at the very most. So it doesn't make a huge difference to what it is at the moment. But that'd still be a bit better because I think it is difficult for like Kelly and St Mirren, teams that are kind of doing well. Like obviously like Aberdeen as well. But then like Hearts fans just don't care. It's hard for Kelly and St Mirren fans to get tickets to Tynecastle. So like that would just be the standard response.
Exactly, but it should be the response. It should be that is bad. And
I think the thing, it's an interesting one because Aberdeen's the only one where you could say, well, they should get more. Like Celtic and Rangers, Celtic and Rangers like give like Hearts fans a tiny sliver of Ibrox and Celtic Park. So that's very much that's very much what you were saying earlier. Well, you don't do it for us, so why should we do it for you? Mm-hmm. Aberdeen's the only one I would say it's a wee bit kind of crap because Hearts, I think, I might be wrong on this, but I think Hearts got a better away support at Aberdeen and certainly before than Aberdeen would get in this season with that just kind of one sliver. But when you look at teams like your Motherwells, like your Killys, like your St Mirrens, if you extend it to two sections, are they actually going to sell it out? And quite possibly not. But I do agree with you that they should be given the kind of the chance to more often than just having it. I think one section is a bit crap. Two's fine. I mean, if two fits into 5%, I'd certainly be happy with that. But a lot of Hearts fans are going to disagree, especially when it comes to Celtic and Rangers.
Which is the problem. Because ultimately everybody puts their own biases into it. So yeah, that's
and the whataboutery as well. Like they do it to us, so why should we do it for them?
Exactly. So yeah. And if the clubs aren't going to solve this by themselves ultimately, unless they let somebody do it for them. And I wonder if this is the sort of first step towards that. But that's probably be an optimistic reading of it.
It certainly would. It'd certainly be good if the league had a bit more power and a bit more just money as well. Like, because with more power, they maybe get a bit more funds, and the kind of league can kind of market itself a bit more and stuff like that. But they don't really have that. Well, I think we do. Do we not have one kind of marketing person or something for the SPFL?
Yeah, it's not. I mean, it's
the way Scottish football's run's not great. Not great with just being a kind of members institution and everybody just kind of fought over each other.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right, Euan, I think that'll do us. Thank you very much for joining me.
Thanks, Craig.
And thank you very much to everybody for watching and for listening on our Patreon subscription. We will talk to you again soon. Goodbye.